A resolution regarding the Illinois Safety, Accountability, Fairness, and Equity Today Safety Act.
Mr. Chairman,
Trustee Compass.
I move to adopt a resolution entitled, "A Resolution Regarding Illinois Safety, Accountability, Fairness, and Equity Today Safety Act," and demand that state lawmakers own up to the mistakes they have made with the erroneously named Safety Act and get rid of the dangerous provisions of the Safety Act that hamper the ability of law enforcement to pursue and arrest offenders.
Second.
And I'm going to read the resolution first and make my comments first, and then the board can clean up anything that I've missed, because I've been dealing with this for quite some time, both legislatively and with other towns as well. But so a resolution supporting continued efforts to resolve public safety concerns with the Safety Act. Whereas the Village of Orland Park's mission is to provide services that ensure a high quality of life, sound fiscal management, and a dynamic business environment while creating an inclusive community that values diversity. And whereas providing a safe and secure community for all Orland Park residents and businesses is a focus of the village's priority plan. And whereas the Orland Park Police Department has been a leader in police training, policy and practice, accountability and transparency. And whereas the village values public engagement and stakeholder involvement to ensure all perspectives are considered in the development of legislation. And whereas on January 22nd, 2021, the Illinois Safety, Fairness, and Equity Today Act, Safety Act, was signed into law, which imposes significant changes impacting many aspects of criminal justice system, including pre-arrest diversion, policing, pre-trial sentencing, and corrections. And whereas the Safety Act was poorly drafted, nearly 800 pages, and passed in the middle of the night with little to no public debate. And whereas the state legislature has since made a handful of changes to the Safety Act, but there are still many provisions in the sweeping new law that are not workable and or create public safety concerns. And whereas the law abolishes cash bail as of January 1st, 2023, that all defendants charged with criminal acts should be released from custody without posting monetary bail, which will cause major public safety issues. And whereas violent offenders who are released on electronic monitoring and choose to violate the terms of their release have to be in violation for 48 hours before law enforcement can act. Whereas this denies crime victims their constitutional rights from Article 1, Section 8.1 of the Illinois Constitution, codified in the Rights of Crime Victims and Witnesses Act, that mandates that crime victims shall have the right to have their safety and that their families considered in denying or fixing the amount of bail, determining whether to release the defendant, and setting conditions of release after arrest and conviction. And whereas eliminating bail not only contradicts previously established and superior law, it places crime victims at a greater risk to be re-victimized and unnecessarily subjects witnesses to threats and intimidation. And whereas the law severely weakens the habitual crime statutes and three-strike sentencing laws, making it harder for our criminal justice system to keep repeat violent offenders off the streets and behind bars. And whereas the village worked with the Illinois Association of Chiefs of Police to share public safety concerns about the Safety Act after its initial release and during consideration of subsequent trailer bills. And whereas the village supports certain elements of the Safety Act and has already implemented elements including body cameras and use of force training. And whereas the Safety Act contains several elements that impact the ability of the village to most effectively provide police services, including, but not limited to, unreasonably limiting the imposition of cash bail, unreasonably limiting police officers' discretion to make arrests, imposing unreasonable police certification and decertification standards, and mandating unreasonable custodial accommodations. And whereas this poorly drafted law containing ill-conceived directives would negatively affect the safety of every citizen of our community. And whereas we must stand with the men and women of law enforcement who consistently stand up for us, and we must not allow this law to stand as passed. And whereas there is an opportunity for legislators to continue to work with public safety representatives and all community stakeholders to further amend the Safety Act to address outstanding public safety concerns, and whereas a failure to remove these provisions or repeal the Safety Act prior to January 1st, 2023 will put the safety of law-abiding citizens and police officers at risk. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the President and Board of Trustees of the Village of Orland Park, Cook and Will Counties, Illinois, in exercise of its home rule authority as follows. The Village of Orland Park demands that the state legislators work with public safety representatives and all community stakeholders to fix remaining problems with the Safety Act, including but not limited to unreasonably limiting the imposition of cash bail, unreasonably limiting police officer discretion to make arrests, imposing unreasonable police certification and decertification standards, mandating unreasonable custodial accommodations, unreasonably allowing offenders to violate terms of their release, and violating victims' rights as outlined in Illinois law. The Village of Orland Park demands that these provisions are removed, or that the Safety Act be repealed prior to their implementation on January 1st, 2023. My comments on this: I can't even begin to tell you how dangerous this act is. First, it was passed in the middle of the night with 40 minutes to read an 800-page bill, which is unacceptable. As of January 1st, 2023, the following things will go into effect, and people need to be aware of this. It abolishes cash bail for almost every offense. This includes, but isn't limited to, kidnapping, armed robbery, second-degree murder, drug-induced homicide, aggravated DUI, threatening a public official, and aggravated fleeing and eluding. Offenders released on electronic monitoring have to be in violation for 48 hours before law enforcement can act. They could almost drive to Alaska before we can even look for them. It denies victims their constitutional rights. And keep this in mind, businesses and homeowners: officers will no longer be able to remove trespassers from your residence or your businesses. Someone could decide to live in your shed, and all we can do is give them a ticket. You have to decide what level of force is required to remove them and whether or not it's legal. This is a massive threat to the residents of Orland Park, Cook County, and Illinois. I want to remind voters that several elected officials that will be on the ballot in Orland Park voted for this abomination. Senator Michael Hastings, Senator Emil Jones, and Representative Justin Slaughter all voted to put criminals ahead of the safety of law-abiding citizens and police. In particular, Senator Hastings, who personally told me that this bill, that he had a family, and that this bill was horrible, and there was no way he would vote for it. An outright lie that, in my opinion, disqualifies him to hold his office. I will gladly cast my vote for this resolution and demand the repeal of the Orwellian-named Safety Act. But it doesn't end here. There is currently a bill in front of the House to remove school resource officers from our schools, which means no resource officer at Sandburg High School. The city of Chicago has already done this. I personally don't want to see the city of Chicago become the standard for how we conduct public safety, because they've abandoned their police officers and abandoned their residents and created a war zone full of criminals. There's also a bill to make fentanyl a misdemeanor in this state. And I want to remind you that we have representatives that currently represent us or will represent us potentially in the federal government that voted to not extend the fentanyl ban federally. Fortunately, it passed, but there are people that actually believe that we shouldn't have a ban on fentanyl that currently represent our community. That's just absolutely unacceptable. It's like they won't stop until they destroy our communities and our society. We all need to take a stand against this. This is a very, very dangerous bill. I'll open up the comments to the floor.
Mr. Chairman?
Trustee Compass.
Try to edit my notes in real time. I think to start off, we've said it many times before, but it's always worth repeating. I believe our police department sets the standard of excellence for all others. We're very blessed that we have a very deep well of talented officers committed to serving our village, and that we can so easily promote from within speaks volumes to the training and commitment of this department. To the women and men of the Orland Park Police Department, thank you. I hope you know just how much our community appreciates and supports you. But cutting through some of the notes here so I'm not too redundant, I do want to point out on July 4th, Will County State's Attorney stated that of the 640 detainees in the jail, 60 of which have been charged with murder, all of them will have their bonds extinguished in January due to the new pretrial system. It's not a partisan issue. The Will County State's Attorney that I'm speaking of is a Democrat. The DuPage County State's Attorney recently had similar remarks with the 500-some detainees there. He mentioned the higher burden that prosecutors must prove that the accused is a present threat, not to the general public, but to a specific identifiable person. So let me repeat that. It's not if they hold someone, if they represent a danger to the public. The prosecutor has to prove that there's a specific identifiable person that is threatened. So if a man murders his wife in a domestic homicide, To whom then would they prove that he's a danger then, after the fact? Should he be released? Should someone who killed someone in crossfire on a highway be released because the threat was not specific to that person? Since when must acts of evil be specifically targeted to be considered dangerous to our community? Over the past weekend, there was a viral video of an armed mugging that occurred in broad daylight in Lakeview on Sunday afternoon. I won't kid anyone that if those muggers are caught due to the Cook County system, they'll likely be out, but the new system would guarantee it. How could a prosecutor prove that they pose a specific threat to an identifiable person when they certainly did not know the woman that they mugged? The point of bail is to strongly encourage showing up to court. Today, if the defendant is charged with a felony, fails to show up in court, they're charged with another felony offense, one class lower than the original charge. In January, that becomes a misdemeanor. Yet we're supposed to believe that defendants will show up under this new system. How is this fair to the victims of these crimes? But it's not just felonies. As the mayor mentioned, criminal trespass is going to be reduced to a citation. So you might be considering what happens for retail and restaurants. You can also see how this is going to go sideways for you personally. What happens if you return to find someone swimming in your pool? Or worse, what if your teenage child has a stalker that decides to hang out in your backyard and you can't prove the threat? What does that mean for us? Just the tip of the iceberg to a 764-page bill that's since seen some revisions, but not nearly enough. Again, for the representatives and senators that voted for this, why do they feel it necessary to wait until after the election for these provisions to take effect? That's cowardly. I implore our residents to read more about this act, contact your representative and senator, ask if they remove the provisions that endanger the lives of all citizens, especially our law enforcement officers.
Mr. Chairman?
Trustee Malani.
I think Mayor Pica and Trustee Campos summed up quite a few of my thoughts. However, I'd like to share a few more things about this law. Here's an interesting one that I found. Suspects will be allowed 3 free phone calls prior to being questioned. I guess that's to get their facts straight. There's been controversial changes to the policies around arrest and release from police custody that could actually place additional stress on our system. And most importantly, there was no funding for training included in this bill for frontline officers. So once again, we have unfunded mandates from our state, and we must foot the bill. The state, in its infinite wisdom, once again in law enforcement, has quickly decided to make the career of a police officer more dangerous while making the career of a criminal easier than ever. And as Mayor Pica mentioned, there was a laundry list of non-detainable offenses that go into effect as part of the Safety Act. So what does that exactly mean? It means that these criminals be allowed to commit crimes and to be charged with these crimes and released without bail. Some of them that he didn't list include arson, burglary, robbery, and intimidation among the other ones he listed. So I think this paints a pretty good picture of why this law really needs to be reconsidered. And as we've all mentioned in previous meetings, our department goes above and beyond to protect our community, be involved with our community through outreach, and continuously adds new programs to protect and serve Orland Park. The Safety Act laughs in the faces of these officers that provide those services. While it is great that Orland Park has been proactive with our decisions like body-worn camera programs, mental health services, partnerships, and extensive community outreach plans, the Safety Act will do nothing more than place extra strain on our system while providing criminals with more flexibility and privilege. I really hope that our state steps back, reviews the situation, and reconsiders. Unfortunately, I don't think that's going to be the case.
Are there any other comments?
Mr. Mayor,
Trustee Katsinas.
I think Bill and I are the two, or Trustee Healy and I are the two grandparents. Oh, I'm sorry, Mayor Pico as well. You think of this and the repercussions with kids and your grandkids and the direction these type of acts are having on our society as a whole. This weighs the criminal instead of the victim. The criminals are having more and more rights, where the victims that are getting victimized are just being pushed aside. So as Trustee Campos and Malani said, please reach out to your elected officials, ask them to remove these unbelievable, items on this bill that really, really hurt society as a whole. It doesn't matter what your political persuasion is. Thank you.
Any other comments?
Mr. Mayor,
Trustee Healy?
I found out the other day that I'm an enemy of democracy. And, watching how the governor here and the legislators passed this middle-of-the-night effort, I guess I'm an enemy of that, too. That's not democracy. It's tyranny that they're using here. Another side issue, which I've personally been talked with some people about is I know three judges I've discussed with their retirement. They've got 25, 30, 40 years with the circuit court. They've tried a lot of criminal cases. But the impositions on them, the judges, is just as strenuous as, maybe not as much, but as the police, but they've got to reissue a report after every hearing, and they've got to do a detailed study about it. The workload is just impossible, and they're getting out while they can. So you're going to see a lack of, on the judiciary, which is a last line there of defense. Some good guys are retiring from the bench with a lot of good experience, and they'll be replaced by the low bail group, the no bail group, which is not going to make us safer at home. There's a website out there that I look at, is CWB Chicago, where I've been watching for a year, where you can see these evidence of videos of people being mugged, shot, and the stories behind them, the stories about the judges and who failed the system. 5 years ago, I felt like before we got elected, I felt we were safe here. But in our tenure, safety has gone off the rails, and in our tenure on this board, we've done everything we can, I believe, to help make people safe, but the state has gone awry, and I don't think it's not just one bill. As Keith said, there's a number of bills out there. You have to stay vigilant against the evil that's out there. So we'll have to do our best, and just encourage everybody to do what they can to help stop this oncoming crime wave. Thanks.
Mr. Mayor,
Trustee Radiszewski.
I'll chime in with some comments, and thank you, everyone, for your comments. I agree with all of them wholeheartedly. This act, it scares me. It definitely poses a threat to public safety, to victims, to witnesses of violent crimes. But one thing that we kind of didn't address is how people are going to take the law into their own hands. So, Sean, you mentioned about, what if you get home and somebody's in your pool, or, you have a daughter and the stalker is outside in the yard, and all you can do is call the police, and the police, will give that person a ticket. I can only imagine that a father, a husband, just a loved one is going to want to protect their loved one. If somebody's trying to hurt my child, how are you, not saying that I would take the law into my own hand, but I could just see how that could happen. More and more people are buying guns because they're not feeling safe. I just think it's just anarchy. So definitely, please, I think everybody needs to speak up. This can't go into effect. That's all.
So I'll only clean up the comments a little bit to point out with Trustee Healy is that you are safe here in Orland Park and have been. But the pressure on our police because of these policies, and by the way, this is Kim Foxx's policies on steroids. Okay, that's what this is. This is worse than her policies. And with those policies, we have stretched our police department. We have changed how we do things. We do things way differently to keep you safe, and we've kept crime down in Orland Park, but it's not because our police officers aren't busy. We're busier than we ever have been, but it's because of the efforts we made. But to all the trustees' points, going forward, our law enforcement officials won't be able to do that anymore. We'll have our hands tied, and we won't be able to do anything to stop these policies. We won't be able. It's not only the Kim Foxx policies, but this is worse. This is absolutely even worse than her policies. So the people, you don't have to rise up and picket and yell. You have a voice. It's called Election Day. Remember all these state legislators and vote them out. Enough is enough. You keep voting for these people like Kim Fox was reelected, you're going to keep getting the same garbage until, exactly as Trustee Radishevsky said, we end up in a position where we have anarchy and we have people taking the law in their own hands, which none of us want to see. Call the roll.
Trustee Compass.
Aye.
Trustee Katsinas.
Aye.
Trustee Healy.
Aye.
Trustee Malani.
Aye.
Trustee Radishevsky.
Aye.
Mayor Peacock.
Aye.
Any non-scheduled citizens and visitors? Board comments.